They told me I killed him. They said it so often, I almost believed it myself. I stood at the window of Greymore Hall the morning they found him, watching the fog crawl across the gardens like something alive, something guilty. The mist clung to the rose hedges and wrapped itself around the stone fountain where I used to sit in the early days of my marriage, back when I still believed I could be happy here. My hands were steady on the sill. My breath did not catch. I had learned, in 6 years of marriage, not to show what I felt. The Duke had taught me that, if nothing else. Control, he used to say, is the mark of breeding. Emotion is for the common. So I stood there without tears, without trembling, and watched the fog erase the world. The physician arrived before noon. I heard his boots on the marble, heard the low murmur of voices in the hallway below. I did not go down. They had not asked for me. They never did. Even in death, my husband preferred the company of others. I pressed my forehead against the cold glass and closed my eyes, listening to the house come alive with grief that was not mine, with sorrow I had no right to feel. I was 19 when I married him. He was 39, a man of granite and silence, with eyes the color of winter storms. My father had been so proud. The Duke of Greymore, he said, as if the title itself were a blessing, as if the weight of that name could make up for everything else. My mother wept at the wedding, and I thought it was from joy. I wore white silk and orange blossoms and felt like a lamb dressed for slaughter. I understand now that she knew. She knew what it meant to be given to a man who did not ask if you wished to be given at all. The first year, I tried to love him. I wore the gowns he chose, emerald greens and deep crimsons that made my skin look pale as death. I smiled at his guests, men with hard eyes and women with sharp tongues who looked at me as though I were a curiosity, a prize he had won. I sat silent at his table, night after night, while he discussed politics and land and money, never once turning to me, never once asking what I thought. I waited for him to see me, truly see me, the way my mother said a husband should. But he looked through me as though I were glass, transparent, breakable, unnecessary. The second year I stopped trying. By the third, I had learned to disappear. Greymore Hall was a monument to his family, a place of endless corridors and locked doors, of portraits that watched you with dead eyes and rooms that smelled of dust and old perfume. The east wing was forbidden. The north tower was always locked. The servants moved like ghosts, silent and unseen, and I learned to move the same way. I was allowed to walk the gardens, to read in the library, to attend church on Sundays where I sat in the Greymore pew and felt the eyes of the village on my back, judging, always judging. I was not allowed to speak to the tenants without permission, to leave the estate without escort, to write letters that were not first inspected by his secretary, Mr. Corbett, a thin man with ink-stained fingers who looked at me as though I were a child who could not be trusted with a pen. I was a duchess in name. In truth, I was a decoration, a portrait on the wall, a vase filled with flowers that no one remembered to water. And yet, I told myself I was lucky. He did not raise his hand to me. He did not come to my bed with cruelty or with violence. He simply did not come at all. Our wedding night, he stood at the door of my chamber, looked at me for a long moment, and said, "I will not trouble you." Then he left. I did not see him again for a week. There were whispers, of course. The servants said he kept a mistress in London, a widow with dark hair and a house in Mayfair. Others said he had loved a woman once, long before me, and that she had died in childbirth, and that he had buried his heart with her and the babe. I did not ask. I did not care. I had learned to live in the silence, to make a home of it, to wrap it around myself like a cloak. But then, in the autumn of our 6th year, he began to change. It was subtle at first, a hesitation when he passed me in the hall, as though he wanted to speak but could not find the words. A glance that lingered a moment too long, his gray eyes searching my face for something I could not name. Once at dinner, he asked me if I was happy. The question was so unexpected, so strange, that I nearly dropped my fork. I said yes, of course, because that was what he wanted to hear. He nodded and looked away, and I thought that was the end of it. But it was not. He started to leave books in the library, books I had mentioned wanting to read, poetry by Wordsworth, novels by Miss Austen. He began to ask my opinion on matters of the estate, though he never acted on what I said. And then, one evening in late autumn, when the fire was burning low and the rain was tapping against the windows, he came to my sitting room and stood in the doorway, watching me embroider by the fire. He did not speak. He simply stood there, one hand on the frame, his face half in shadow, as though he were trying to remember something he had forgotten. I should have asked him what he wanted. I should have said something, anything. But I had lived too long in his silence. I had no words left for him. I kept my eyes on my needle, on the pale thread I was pulling through white linen, and pretended I did not see him. He turned and left, and I did not see him again for 3 days. When he returned, he was ill. At first, they said it was nothing, a fever, a chill from riding in the rain. The Duke had always been strong. They said he would recover in a day or two. But it did not pass. He grew pale, then gray. His hands trembled when he tried to write. He stopped coming down to dinner. The physician was called, then another, then a specialist from London, a man with spectacles and a black leather bag who looked at me as though I were something distasteful. They whispered in corners, shook their heads, prescribed tonics and powders that did nothing. I asked to see him. The housekeeper, Mrs. Daventry, a tall woman with a face like stone, told me he did not wish to be disturbed. I asked again the next day. She said the same, her voice flat, her eyes cold. On the 3rd day, I went to his door myself and knocked. There was no answer. I pressed my ear to the wood and heard nothing. No breathing. No movement. Only silence. I thought he was already dead. But he was not. Not yet. The night he died, there was a storm. The kind that shakes the windows and makes the chandeliers sway. The kind that feels like the end of the world. I could not sleep. I paced my room, listened to the thunder, felt the walls close in. The candles flickered and went out. The darkness pressed against me like a living thing, and then, just past midnight, there was a knock at my door. It was Mr. Corbett, the Duke's secretary. His face was pale, his eyes red and rimmed with exhaustion. He said the Duke was asking for me. His voice cracked on the word asking, as though he could not believe it himself. I did not believe him. In 6 years, my husband had never asked for me. Not once. But I followed him down the dark hallway, through the east wing where the portraits seemed to watch us pass, to the Duke's chamber. The door was open. Inside, the room was filled with candlelight, too much of it, as though someone were trying to hold back the dark. The air was thick with the smell of sickness, of sweat and medicine and something else, something bitter and wrong. The physician stood by the window, his hands clasped behind his back, staring out at the storm. The Dowager Duchess, my husband's mother, sat in a chair near the bed, her black gown rustling like wings, her face a mask of stone. And there, beneath the heavy velvet canopy, was my husband. He looked so small. I had never thought of him as small. He had always been a presence, a weight, a shadow that filled every room he entered. But now he was just a man, thin and gray, his breath shallow and uneven, his hair damp with fever. He turned his head when I entered. His eyes found mine. And for the first time in 6 years, I saw something in them I recognized. Fear. He lifted one hand, just slightly, and gestured for me to come closer. I hesitated. The Dowager Duchess made a small sound of disapproval, a soft hiss that cut through the silence. But I moved forward, slowly, my slippers silent on the thick carpet, until I stood beside the bed. He reached for my hand. His fingers were cold, so cold, like ice wrapped in parchment. He opened his mouth to speak, but no sound came. He tried again, his lips forming words I could not hear. I leaned closer, so close I could smell the sickness on him, the bitter scent of laudanum and something else, something darker, something that made my stomach turn. And then he whispered, so faint I almost missed it. Forgive me. I pulled back. I stared at him. I did not understand. His eyes closed. His hand went slack in mine. And then, with one last shuddering breath, he was gone. The room erupted. The physician rushed forward, pressing his fingers to my husband's throat, his wrist, searching for a pulse that was no longer there. The Dowager Duchess cried out, a sharp, keening sound that seemed to come from somewhere deep inside her. Mr. Corbett hurried to the door to summon the staff. But I stood there, frozen, holding the hand of a dead man, feeling the warmth leave his skin, feeling the weight of his last words settle over me like a shroud. Forgive me. What did he mean? Forgive him for what? For the years of silence? For the cold indifference? For dying and leaving me here, alone, in this tomb of a house with a family that had never wanted me? Or for something else entirely? I did not have time to think. The Dowager Duchess rose from her chair, her black gown rustling like the wings of some great predatory bird. She looked at me with eyes like iron, hard and unforgiving, and said in a voice that could cut glass, "You will leave this room. Now." I obeyed. I always obeyed. But as I turned to go, I saw it. On the bedside table, half hidden beneath a folded cloth, was a letter. The seal was broken. The paper was cream-colored, expensive, the kind the Duke used for important correspondence. The handwriting was his. I recognized the sharp angles, the decisive strokes, and it was addressed to me. I reached for it, but the Dowager Duchess was faster. She snatched it away, held it to her chest with both hands, and said, "This is not for you." I stared at her. I wanted to scream. I wanted to fight. I wanted to tear that letter from her hands and run far away from this place and never look back. But I did nothing. I simply turned and walked out of the room, down the hallway, back to my chamber, where I locked the door and stood in the darkness, shaking, my whole body trembling with something I could not name. Rage, grief, relief. They told me he died of illness. They told me it was sudden, unexpected, a tragedy that no one could have foreseen. But the whispers started before dawn. Poison, they said. It must have been poison. Who else had access to his food, his drink, his medicine? Who else stood to gain from his death? Who else would have wanted him gone? The young Duchess, they said. The one who never smiled. The one who never spoke. The one who was too beautiful, too cold, too silent. The one who walked the halls like a ghost. The one who must have hated him. And they were right about one thing. I did hate him, but I did not kill him. I swear it on my life, on my soul, on everything I have left. I did not kill him, but I know who did. The funeral was held 3 days later, on a morning so bright it felt like a mockery. The sun burned through the mist, gilding the gravestones in the family plot, turning the dew on the grass into diamonds. I stood at the graveside in black bombazine that scratched my throat, a veil covering my face, and listened to the vicar speak of a man I had never known. He spoke of kindness and generosity, of duty and honor, of a life well lived. The mourners nodded and dabbed at their eyes with handkerchiefs. I stood silent and still, my hands folded, my breathing even. I had learned to be a statue. The Dowager Duchess stood across from me, draped in black silk and jet beads that clicked like teeth when she moved. She had not spoken to me since the night he died. She had not looked at me. But I felt her gaze now, cold and sharp as a blade, cutting through the veil, through the fabric, through my skin. She blamed me. I could see it in every line of her body, in the rigid set of her shoulders, in the way she held her mouth as though she were biting back words too poisonous to speak aloud. Beside her stood Lord Ashford, the Duke's younger brother, a man I had met only twice in 6 years. He was taller than my husband had been, broader, with dark hair and a face that might have been handsome if it were not so cold. He watched me with the same pale gray eyes as his brother, and I wondered what he saw. A grieving widow? A murderess? A woman who had finally gotten what she wanted? The coffin was lowered into the ground. The vicar said the final words. The mourners began to drift away, back toward the hall where a reception had been prepared, cold meats and wine and whispered conversations. I remained. I stood at the edge of the grave and looked down at the polished wood disappearing into the earth, and I felt nothing. No grief, no relief. Only a strange, hollow emptiness, as though something had been carved out of me and I had not yet noticed the wound. I heard footsteps behind me. I did not turn. Lady Genevieve. The voice was soft, hesitant. I recognized it. Miss Hartley, the vicar's daughter, a girl of perhaps 20 with kind eyes and a gentle manner. She had tried to befriend me once, in the early years of my marriage, but I had been too afraid to let her. The Duke did not approve of friendships. He said they led to gossip, to indiscretion, to scandal. I turned slowly. She stood a few paces away, twisting her gloves in her hands, her round face flushed with uncertainty. "I am so sorry for your loss," she said. "If there is anything I can do, anything at all." I nodded. "Thank you." My voice sounded strange to my own ears, thin and distant, as though it were coming from someone else. She hesitated, then leaned closer, lowering her voice. "There are terrible things being said. Terrible lies. I do not believe them. I wanted you to know that." I stared at her. "What lies?" She glanced over her shoulder, checking to see if anyone was near. "They are saying," she whispered, "that the Duke was poisoned. That someone gave him something. Something that made him ill. And they are saying it was you." I felt the ground tilt beneath me. I reached out, grasping the edge of a headstone to steady myself. "Who is saying this?" "Everyone." Her voice was barely audible. "The servants, the tenants, even some of the gentry. They say you had reason to hate him. They say you were seen near his chamber the night before he fell ill. They say you brought him his tea yourself. I did not. I barely saw him in those final weeks. He would not allow it." She bit her lip. "I know. I believe you. But others do not. And the Dowager Duchess," she paused, "she has spoken to the magistrate." The magistrate. The word landed like a stone in my chest. "Why?" Miss Hartley looked away. "There is to be an inquest. They want to examine the body. They want to know how he truly died." I closed my eyes. The sun was too bright, the air too thick. I felt as though I were drowning. When? Tomorrow. I opened my eyes and looked at her. She was watching me with something like pity, and I hated it. I did not want pity. I wanted the truth. I wanted the letter my husband had written, the letter the Dowager Duchess had stolen from me. I wanted to know what he had been trying to say. "Thank you," I said quietly, "for telling me." She nodded and stepped back, glancing once more over her shoulder before hurrying away toward the carriages. I watched her go, then turned back to the grave. The groundskeeper was already filling it in, shoveling dirt onto the coffin with rhythmic, indifferent efficiency. Soon there would be nothing left to see. Just another mound of earth, another name on a stone, another life forgotten. I walked back to the hall alone. The house was full of people, mourners dressed in black who wandered through the drawing room and the dining room, eating and drinking and speaking in hushed tones. I moved through them like a ghost, invisible, unnoticed. No one spoke to me. No one met my eyes. I was already condemned. I climbed the stairs to my chamber and locked the door. I pulled off the veil and the heavy black gown and stood in my shift, staring at myself in the mirror. I looked pale, thin, hollow. I looked like someone who had been slowly disappearing for years. I pressed my hands against the glass and whispered, "Who are you?" But I had no answer. I sat on the edge of the bed and tried to think. The inquest would be tomorrow. They would examine the body. They would question the servants, the physician, anyone who had been near him in those final days. And they would question me. What would I say? That I did not kill him? That I had no reason to want him dead? But I did have reason. Everyone knew it. A loveless marriage. A cold, indifferent husband. 6 years of silence and isolation. What jury would believe me? I needed the letter. Whatever my husband had written, it was the only thing that might save me. But how could I get it? The Dowager Duchess would never give it to me willingly. She would burn it first, destroy any evidence that might cast doubt on her version of events. She wanted me to hang. I was certain of it. There was a knock at the door. I froze. "Come in," I said, though my voice was barely a whisper. The door opened. It was Millie, my lady's maid, a girl of perhaps 18 with red hair and frightened eyes. She slipped inside and closed the door quickly behind her. "My lady," she said, her voice shaking, "I need to speak with you." I stood. "What is it?" She twisted her apron in her hands, just as Miss Hartley had twisted her gloves. "They are saying things, my lady, horrible things. They are saying you poisoned the Duke." "I know." She looked up at me, her eyes wide. "Did you?" I stared at her. The question hung in the air between us, sharp and dangerous. "No," I said. "I did not." She let out a breath, her shoulders sagging with relief. "I did not think so. I told them it was nonsense, that you would never do such a thing. But they would not listen. Who would not listen? The other servants. Mrs. Daventry, the housekeeper. She is the worst. She has been saying terrible things. She says you hated the Duke. She says you were always cold to him, always distant. She says you must have wanted him gone." I felt a flicker of anger, hot and sharp. Mrs. Daventry had never liked me. She had been in service to the Greymore family for 30 years, and she considered me an outsider, an interloper, unworthy of the title I bore. But to accuse me of murder, that was something else entirely. What else has she said? Millie hesitated, then spoke in a rush. "She says she saw you in the East Wing the night before the Duke fell ill. She says you were near his chamber, that you were carrying something. A tray, she thinks, with tea. I was not. I never went to the East Wing. I was not allowed." Millie bit her lip. "I know, my lady. But she swears it is true. And others believe her." I sat down heavily on the bed. This was worse than I had thought. If the servants were testifying against me, if they were saying they saw me near his chamber, then I had no defense. It would be my word against theirs, and my word meant nothing. Millie stepped closer. "There is something else, my lady. Something you should know." "What?" She glanced at the door, as though afraid someone might be listening. "The Duke's physician, Dr. Winters, he came to the hall yesterday. He spoke with the Dowager Duchess for a long time. I overheard some of it. He said the Duke's symptoms were consistent with poisoning. He said it was likely arsenic. Arsenic. The word sent a chill through me. Arsenic was easy to obtain. It was used to kill rats, to treat ailments, to preserve taxidermy. Every household had it, and it was nearly impossible to detect. Did he say anything else? He said the inquest would likely rule in favor of an investigation. He said they would want to question everyone who had access to the Duke's food and drink. And he said," she paused, her voice dropping to a whisper, "he said the Dowager Duchess had already given them a list of names. And yours was at the top." I closed my eyes. Of course it was. Millie knelt in front of me, taking my hands in hers. "My lady, you must leave. You must go tonight before the inquest. If you stay, they will arrest you. They will put you on trial. And if they find you guilty," she stopped, unable to finish the sentence. I looked down at her young face, at the fear and desperation in her eyes. She was trying to help me. She was the only one who had shown me any kindness in this God-forsaken house. But I could not run. If I ran, it would be an admission of guilt. I would be a fugitive, hunted, condemned. I would never be able to clear my name. I cannot run, I said quietly. I did nothing wrong. I will not let them make me into a criminal. But my lady, I squeezed her hands, listen to me. I need you to do something for me. I need you to find that letter. What letter? The letter my husband wrote before he died. The Dowager Duchess took it from his chamber. It was addressed to me. I need to know what it says. Millie's eyes widened. You want me to steal from the Dowager Duchess? I want you to retrieve what is rightfully mine. That letter may be the only thing that can prove my innocence. Please, Millie. I have no one else. She stared at me for a long moment, then nodded slowly. I will try, my lady, but I cannot promise anything. She guards that letter closely. She keeps it in her chamber, locked in her writing desk. Then find a way to get it. Please. Millie stood and smoothed her apron. I will do my best, my lady, but you must be careful. Do not speak to anyone. Do not leave your chamber. And do not trust anyone, not even those who seem kind. I nodded. She slipped out of the room, closing the door softly behind her. I sat alone in the silence, listening to the murmur of voices below, the clink of glasses, the occasional burst of laughter. They were celebrating, I realized, not mourning. The Duke was dead, and they were relieved. Perhaps some of them had hated him as much as I had. Perhaps some of them were glad he was gone. But they still blamed me. I stood and walked to the window. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the lawn. The guests were beginning to leave, climbing into their carriages and disappearing down the long drive. Soon, the house would be quiet again. Soon, I would be alone with the Dowager Duchess and her accusations, with the servants and their lies, with the weight of a crime I did not commit. I pressed my hand against the glass and thought of my husband's last words. Forgive me. What had he meant? What had he done that required forgiveness? And why had he waited until the very end to ask for it? I did not know, but I intended to find out, even if it cost me everything, even if it cost me my life. The inquest was held in the drawing room, a space I had always hated. It was too grand, too cold, with its high ceilings and gilded mirrors and furniture that seemed designed to make you feel small. Now it had been transformed into a courtroom, with chairs arranged in rows and a long table at the front, where the magistrate sat with his papers and his stern expression. The Dowager Duchess sat to his right, dressed in black silk, her back straight, her hands folded in her lap. She looked like a queen presiding over the trial of a traitor. I sat alone on the opposite side of the room, with no one to speak for me, no one to stand beside me. Millie had tried to come, but Mrs. Daventry had forbidden it. The other servants lined the walls, their faces blank, their eyes carefully averted. They would not look at me. They would not help me. I was already guilty in their minds. The magistrate was Sir Edmund Thornhill, a man of perhaps 60 with white hair and a face like carved wood. He had known the Duke, had dined at this very table many times. He would not be impartial. I knew that before he even opened his mouth. Lady Genevieve Ashford, he began, his voice echoing through the room. You are here to answer questions regarding the death of your husband, His Grace the Duke of Greymoor. Do you understand? I stood. My legs felt weak, but I kept my voice steady. I understand. Please be seated. I sat. My hands were shaking. I pressed them flat against my skirts, willing them to be still. Sir Edmund shuffled his papers, then looked up at me. It has been brought to my attention that the Duke's death may not have been natural. Dr. Winters, the attending physician, has testified that the symptoms observed in the final weeks of the Duke's life are consistent with arsenic poisoning. Do you know anything about this? I do not. You were the Duke's wife. You lived in this house. You had access to his chambers, his food, his drink. Are you telling me you noticed nothing unusual? My husband did not permit me access to his chambers. I was not allowed to see him during his illness. I was turned away each time I asked. Sir Edmund raised an eyebrow. That is a convenient story. It is the truth. He turned to the Dowager Duchess. Your Grace, did you observe any interaction between the Duke and Lady Genevieve during his final days? The Dowager Duchess lifted her chin. I did not. My son refused to see her. He told me he did not wish to burden her with the sight of his suffering. He was always considerate that way. I bit the inside of my cheek to keep from speaking. Considerate. He had not been considerate. He had been ashamed. Or perhaps he had been protecting me. I did not know any more. Sir Edmund made a note on his paper, then gestured to someone at the back of the room. Mrs. Daventry, please step forward. The housekeeper rose and walked to the front, her face expressionless. She stood with her hands clasped in front of her, the picture of respectability. Mrs. Daventry, Sir Edmund said, you have been in service to the Greymore family for many years. Did you observe anything unusual in the days leading up to the Duke's death? She hesitated, just long enough to make it seem reluctant. I did, sir. I saw Lady Genevieve in the East Wing on the evening of October the 10th. She was carrying a tray with a teapot and a cup. I asked her what she was doing, and she said she was bringing tea to the Duke. I thought it was odd, as the Duke had specifically instructed that no one was to disturb him. But I did not question her further. I stood, my voice sharp. That is a lie. I was never in the East Wing. I never brought him tea. Sir Edmund frowned. Lady Genevieve, please sit down. I will not sit down while this woman tells lies about me. I looked at Mrs. Daventry. Why are you doing this? What have I ever done to you? She met my gaze, her eyes cold. I am simply telling the truth, my lady. No, you are protecting someone. You are covering for whoever truly killed him. The room erupted. The magistrate banged his hand on the table. Silence. Lady Genevieve, if you cannot control yourself, I will have you removed. I sat, my heart pounding, my face hot with anger and humiliation. Sir Edmund turned back to Mrs. Daventry. Did anyone else see Lady Genevieve in the East Wing that evening? She hesitated. I do not know, sir. I did not speak of it at the time. Of course she did not, because it never happened. But I could see the doubt in the magistrate's eyes, the way he looked at me now with suspicion instead of sympathy. Mrs. Daventry was a trusted servant, a woman of good character. I was an outsider, a young wife with no family, no friends, no one to vouch for me. I was losing. Sir Edmund called Dr. Winters next. The physician stood at the front and recounted the Duke's symptoms in clinical detail. Nausea, vomiting, abdominal pain, tremors, difficulty breathing. All consistent with arsenic poisoning, he said. And the dose would have been administered over a period of weeks, perhaps longer, to avoid immediate detection. Is there any way to confirm this? Sir Edmund asked. Only by examining the body, Dr. Winters replied. If arsenic was used, traces would remain in the hair, the nails, the bones. I recommend exhumation. The Dowager Duchess made a small sound of distress. Is that truly necessary? I am afraid so, Your Grace. It is the only way to know for certain. Sir Edmund nodded. Then it shall be done. The body will be exhumed tomorrow morning. I closed my eyes. They were going to dig him up. They were going to cut him open. They were going to find poison in his body, and they were going to blame me for it. The inquest was adjourned. Sir Edmund stood and gathered his papers. Lady Genevieve, you are not to leave the estate until this matter is resolved. Do you understand? I understand. He left, followed by the Dowager Duchess and the servants. I remained in the drawing room, alone, staring at the empty chairs, the cold fireplace, the mirrors that reflected nothing but my own pale face. I had lost. They would find the poison. They would arrest me. And I would hang, unless I found that letter. I waited until dark. The house grew quiet, the servants retreating to their quarters, the candles burning low. I crept out of my chamber and down the hallway, moving as silently as I could. The Dowager Duchess's rooms were in the west wing, a suite of chambers that had once belonged to the Duke's mother. I had never been inside. I was not welcome there. I reached the door and pressed my ear against it. Silence. I tried the handle. Locked. I pulled a hairpin from my hair and worked it into the lock, the way I had seen a maid do once when she had lost her key. It took several minutes, my hands shaking, my breath coming in short gasps. But finally, I heard the click. The door opened. The sitting room was dark, lit only by the moonlight streaming through the window. I closed the door behind me and stood still, letting my eyes adjust. The room smelled of lavender and old perfume. There was a writing desk in the corner, just as Millie had said. I crossed to it and tried the drawers. Locked. I used the hairpin again. This lock was more difficult, more stubborn. My hands were sweating. I could hear my heartbeat in my ears, loud as a drum. And then finally, the lock gave way. I opened the top drawer. Inside were papers, letters, receipts. I rifled through them, my hands clumsy in the dark. And then I saw it. A letter, folded and sealed, with my name written on the front in my husband's hand. I grabbed it and shoved it into my pocket. I was about to close the drawer when I saw something else. Another letter, this one addressed to the Dowager Duchess. The handwriting was different, unfamiliar. I hesitated, then took that one too. I closed the drawer, locked it again, and hurried to the door. I had just opened it when I heard footsteps in the hallway. I froze. The footsteps were coming closer. I slipped back into the room and pressed myself against the wall, my heart hammering. The footsteps stopped outside the door. There was a pause, a long, terrible pause, and then the handle turned. The door opened. A figure stepped inside, holding a candle. The light fell on my face. It was Lord Ashford. He stared at me. I stared back. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then he said, very quietly, "What are you doing here?" I could have lied. I could have said I was lost, confused, sleepwalking. But I was tired of lies. I was tired of pretending. I came for what was mine. I held up the letter. My husband wrote this. It was addressed to me. The Dowager Duchess had no right to keep it. He looked at the letter, then at me. "You broke into her room. She stole from me first." He stepped closer, his eyes searching my face. "Did you kill him?" "No. The servants say you did. The servants are lying, or they are mistaken, or they are protecting someone else." He tilted his head. "Who?" "I do not know, but I intend to find out." He was silent for a long moment. Then he said, "You should leave. Tonight, before they arrest you. I cannot. If I run, I will never be able to prove my innocence. You may not be able to prove it anyway." I looked at him. "Why are you here?" He hesitated. "I could not sleep. I thought I heard something. That is not an answer." He turned away, setting the candle on a table. My brother and I were not close. We had not spoken in years. But he was still my brother, and I want to know who killed him. I took a breath. "Then help me." He turned back to me, surprised. "Why would I help you? Because you do not believe I did it. If you did, you would have called for the magistrate the moment you saw me here." He studied me, his gray eyes unreadable. "What do you want from me?" "I want you to help me find the truth. I want you to help me read this letter and understand what my husband was trying to tell me. And I want you to help me discover who truly poisoned him." He was silent. "Please," I said, "I have no one else." He looked at the letter in my hand. Then he looked at me. "Very well. But we do this my way. And if I find any evidence that you are guilty, I will turn you over to the magistrate myself." I nodded. "Agreed." He gestured to the letter. Read it. I broke the seal with trembling fingers and unfolded the paper. The handwriting was shaky, barely legible, as though it had been written by a man who could hardly hold a pen. But it was his. I would recognize it anywhere. "My dearest Genevieve," it began, "if you are reading this, then I am gone, and you are alone. I am sorry. I am so sorry for everything." I paused, my throat tight. I was a coward. I married you because I needed an heir, because my mother demanded it, because it was my duty. But I did not know how to be a husband. I did not know how to love you. I had loved once before, you see, and it destroyed me. Her name was Catherine. She died giving birth to my son. The child died too. I buried them both and swore I would never love again. But then you came. And you were so young, so beautiful, so full of life, and I was terrified. Terrified that if I let myself love you, I would lose you too. So I kept you at a distance. I ignored you. I hurt you. I thought it was kinder that way. I was wrong. By the time I realized it, it was too late. I was already dying. The physicians do not know what is wrong with me. They say it is my heart, or my liver, or some sickness they cannot name. But I know the truth. I am being poisoned, and I know who is doing it. I stopped reading. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely hold the paper. Lord Ashford stepped closer, looking over my shoulder. "Go on," he said. I took a breath and continued. "I cannot prove it. I have no evidence. But I know, and I am too weak to fight. So I am writing this letter, and I am leaving it for you in the hope that you will be wiser and braver than I ever was. You must leave this place, Genevieve. You must go far away and never come back. They will try to blame you for my death. They will say you killed me, but you did not. You are innocent, and you deserve a life, a real life, not the prison I made for you. Forgive me, my darling. Forgive me for all of it. And know that in the end, you were the only woman I ever truly loved." The letter was signed with his name, but the signature was so faint I could barely make it out. I stood there, staring at the words, my vision blurred with tears. He had loved me. He had loved me, and he had been too afraid to tell me. And now he was gone, and I would never be able to tell him that I forgave him. Lord Ashford took the letter from my hand and read it himself. When he finished, he looked at me. He says he was poisoned. He says he knew who was doing it, but he did not say who. No, he did not. I wiped my eyes. Then we must find out. He folded the letter and handed it back to me. "This will not be enough to clear your name. The magistrate will say you forged it. Then we need more. We need proof. And how do you propose we get it?" I looked at him. "By finding out who had reason to want him dead." He raised an eyebrow. "Besides you, you mean?" I glared at him. "I did not kill him." "Then who did?" I took a breath. "I do not know. But I think it has something to do with the woman he loved. Catherine." He frowned. "That was years ago. She died before I was even born. Then perhaps it was not her. Perhaps it was someone else, someone who hated him, someone who wanted him gone." He was silent for a long moment. Then he said, "There is one person who might know. The Duke's solicitor, Mr. Pembroke. He handled all of my brother's affairs. If there were secrets, he would know them. Then we must speak to him." He nodded. "I will arrange it. But we must be careful. If the Dowager Duchess finds out we are investigating, she will do everything in her power to stop us. Let her try." I folded the letter and placed it carefully in my pocket. "I have nothing left to lose." He looked at me, something like respect flickering in his eyes. "Very well. We start tomorrow." I nodded. And then, for the first time in days, I felt something other than fear. I felt hope. We traveled to London the next morning, before the Dowager Duchess could stop us. Lord Ashford arranged for a carriage and told the servants we were going to consult with another physician regarding the Duke's death. It was not entirely a lie. We were seeking answers, just not the kind they expected. The journey took 3 hours, and we spoke little. I sat across from him, watching the countryside roll past the window, the fields and villages and hedgerows blurring into a green and gray wash. I clutched the letter in my pocket, its presence both a comfort and a weight. It was proof that my husband had loved me, proof that he had been murdered. But it was not enough. Not yet. Lord Ashford sat with his arms crossed, his eyes closed, his face unreadable. He looked so much like his brother, and yet so different. The Duke had been cold, distant, carved from ice. Lord Ashford was warmer somehow, more human, though he tried to hide it behind the same stern expression. I wondered what had happened between them, why they had not spoken in years. But I did not ask. It was not my place. When we arrived in London, the city was grey and wet, the streets slick with rain. The carriage took us through narrow lanes crowded with people and horses and carts, past shops and theatres and grand houses with iron gates. I had not been to London in 6 years. The Duke had forbidden it. He said the city was filthy and corrupt, full of disease and scandal. I think he was simply afraid I would leave him if I saw there was another world beyond Graymore Hall. Mr. Pembroke's office was on a quiet street near Lincoln's Inn, a narrow building with a black door and brass nameplate. Lord Ashford helped me down from the carriage, his hand firm on my elbow, and we climbed the steps together. A clerk opened the door, a young man with ink-stained fingers and a nervous manner. Lord Ashford gave his name, and the clerk's eyes widened. He ushered us inside immediately, through a dim hallway smelling of old paper and lamp oil, into a small office lined with books and files. Mr. Pembroke was older than I had expected, perhaps 70, with white hair and spectacles that perched on the end of his nose. He rose when we entered, his face grave. "Lord Ashford, Lady Genevieve, I am so sorry for your loss. Please, sit." We sat. The chairs were hard and uncomfortable. Mr. Pembroke settled back behind his desk and folded his hands. "I assume you are here regarding the Duke's estate?" Lord Ashford leaned forward. "We are here regarding his death." Mr. Pembroke's expression did not change. "I see. What is it you wish to know?" Lord Ashford glanced at me, then back at the solicitor. "My brother believed he was being poisoned. He wrote a letter to his wife stating as much. But he did not name the person responsible. We need to know if there is anyone who had reason to want him dead." Mr. Pembroke removed his spectacles and polished them slowly with a handkerchief. "That is a dangerous question, Lord Ashford. Nevertheless, it must be asked." The solicitor sighed. "Very well, but what I am about to tell you must remain in confidence. If word of this were to spread, it could destroy what remains of the Graymore name." "I do not care about the name," I said quietly. "I care about the truth." He looked at me for a long moment, then nodded. "The Duke had many secrets, Lady Genevieve, secrets he kept even from you." "I already know about Catherine," I said, "the woman he loved, the one who died." Mr. Pembroke's eyebrows lifted slightly. "Did you know she did not die in childbirth?" I stared at him. "But the letter said what the Duke believed to be true." But it was not the whole truth. He hesitated, choosing his words carefully. Catherine was murdered. The room seemed to tilt. I gripped the arms of my chair. Murdered? By whom? By her husband. Her husband? I looked at Lord Ashford, then back at Mr. Pembroke. "I do not understand." "She was married?" "Yes, to a man named Sir Richard Holt. The Duke and Catherine had been conducting an affair for nearly 2 years. When she became pregnant, she told Sir Richard the child was his. But he discovered the truth. And when he did, he killed her, made it look like complications from childbirth. The Duke suspected, but he could not prove it. Sir Richard was wealthy, well-connected. The matter was quietly buried. Lord Ashford's face had gone pale. "I never knew any of this. Your brother kept it from everyone. He was consumed by guilt. He believed if he had not pursued the affair, Catherine would still be alive. He withdrew from society, refused to marry, refused to have anything to do with women. Until, Mr. Pembroke looked at me, your father approached him with an offer, a marriage that would restore the family line. The Duke agreed, but only on the condition that it would be a marriage in name only. He did not want to risk loving again. I felt something break inside me. So he married me to punish himself. No, my lady. Mr. Pembroke's voice was gentle. He married you because he thought he could keep you safe by keeping you at a distance. But he was wrong. And in the end, I believe he realized it. I closed my eyes. The letter made sense now, all of it. The fear, the coldness, the sudden change at the end. He had been trying to protect me, and in doing so, he had destroyed us both. Lord Ashford spoke, his voice hard. What does this have to do with his death? Mr. Pembroke replaced his spectacles. Sir Richard Holt died 5 years ago, but he had a daughter. Her name is Margaret. She is now Lady Margaret Holt, married to a baronet. She blamed the Duke for her mother's death. She believed the affair had driven her father to madness, to murder. She swore she would make the Duke pay. My breath caught. Where is she now? She is in London, and she has been in contact with someone at Graymore Hall. Who, Mr. Pembroke opened a drawer and pulled out a stack of letters. These arrived over the past year. They were sent to me by the Duke shortly before his death. He wanted them kept safe in case anything happened to him. He paused. They are correspondence between Lady Margaret Holt and someone using the name MDMD, I repeated, Mrs. Daventry. Lord Ashford took the letters and read through them quickly, his face growing darker with each page. This is it. This is the proof. She was working with Lady Margaret to poison him. Slowly, over months, so no one would suspect. But why would Mrs. Daventry do it? I asked. What did she have to gain? Money, Mr. Pembroke said simply. Lady Margaret paid her handsomely. And Mrs. Daventry had always resented the Duke. Her sister had been dismissed from service years ago for theft. She blamed him for ruining her family. I felt cold all over, and they were going to let me hang for it. They still might, Lord Ashford said grimly, unless we bring this evidence to the magistrate. Mr. Pembroke shook his head. These letters alone will not be enough. Lady Margaret will deny everything. Mrs. Daventry will claim they are forgeries. You need a confession. Lord Ashford looked at me. Then we will get one. We left Mr. Pembroke's office with the letters carefully tucked into Lord Ashford's coat. The rain had stopped, but the sky was still gray, heavy with clouds that threatened more. We stood on the steps, and I looked at him. How do we get a confession? We set a trap. What kind of trap? He was silent for a moment, thinking. Then he said, Lady Margaret does not know you have the Duke's letter. She does not know you have discovered her connection to Mrs. Daventry. We use that. We tell her you are about to be arrested, that the magistrate has found enough evidence to convict you, that she has won. And then we see if her pride makes her careless. I nodded slowly. It was risky, but it was all we had. We found Lady Margaret at a house in Belgravia, a grand townhouse with white columns and black railings. Lord Ashford sent a note requesting an audience, claiming he needed to discuss the Duke's estate. She agreed to see us that evening. When we arrived, she was waiting in a drawing room decorated in pale blue and gold, seated on a velvet sofa with a cup of tea in her hand. She was perhaps 30, with dark hair and sharp features and eyes that reminded me of a hawk. She smiled when we entered, but it did not reach her eyes. Lord Ashford, Lady Genevieve. How unexpected. She gestured to the chairs opposite her. Please, sit. I assume this is about your unfortunate situation, Lady Genevieve? I sat, my hands folded in my lap. My unfortunate situation? She sipped her tea. The poisoning accusation. I heard about the inquest. Terrible business. But I suppose these things happen when a young woman marries an older man for his title and fortune. Lord Ashford's voice was cold. You seem remarkably well informed. She shrugged. London is a small world, Lord Ashford. People talk. I leaned forward. Did you know my husband? She set down her teacup. I met him once, many years ago. He was a friend of my father's. Only a friend? Her smile tightened. What are you implying, Lady Genevieve? I am implying that you had reason to hate him, that you blamed him for your mother's death, that you hired someone to poison him. The room went very still. Lady Margaret's face did not change, but something flickered in her eyes. Shock. And then, just as quickly, it was gone. She laughed. That is quite an accusation. Do you have any proof? Lord Ashford pulled the letters from his coat and placed them on the table. These are letters between you and Mrs. Daventry, the housekeeper at Graymore Hall. They detail your plan to poison the Duke over a period of months. They include payments, instructions, and confirmation that the plan was successful. Lady Margaret stared at the letters. Her hand trembled slightly, but she did not reach for them. Those could be forgeries. They are not, I said, and you know it. She looked at me, and for the first time, I saw real hatred in her eyes. He killed my mother. He seduced her, ruined her, destroyed my family, and no one cared. No one punished him. So I did. Lord Ashford stood. You just confessed. She laughed again, but this time it was bitter. It does not matter. You have no witnesses. It is your word against mine. And who do you think they will believe? A lord and a woman accused of murder, or a respectable widow? But she was wrong. The door opened, and Sir Edmund Thornhill stepped inside, followed by 2 constables. He had been listening in the hallway. Lord Ashford had arranged it. Lady Margaret Holt, Sir Edmund said, his voice grave. You are under arrest for the murder of the Duke of Graymore. Her face went white. She stood, backing away. No, you cannot. You are a murderer, I said quietly, and now you will pay for it. The constables took her arms. She struggled, shouting, protesting, but they led her away. Sir Edmund turned to me. Lady Genevieve, I owe you an apology. It seems I was too quick to judge. I nodded. I accept your apology. He hesitated. Mrs. Daventry has also been taken into custody. She confessed everything once she learned Lady Margaret had been arrested. She said she was only following orders, that she needed the money. But the law will not be lenient. Good, Lord Ashford said. Sir Edmund bowed and left. The room was suddenly very quiet. I sank into the chair, my legs weak, my hands shaking. It was over. It was finally over. Lord Ashford sat beside me. You did well. I looked at him. I could not have done it without you. He smiled just slightly. My brother chose wisely when he married you. I see that now. I thought of the letter, of the words my husband had written. You were the only woman I ever truly loved. And I realized, sitting there in that strange drawing room in a city I barely knew, that I had loved him too. Not in the beginning, not in the long years of silence, but at the end, when he had finally let me see him, when he had finally asked for forgiveness, I had loved him. And now he was gone. But I was still here. And I was free. I returned to Graymore Hall 3 days later, but it no longer felt like a prison. The walls were the same, the corridors just as long and shadowed, the portraits still watching with their dead eyes. But I was different. I walked through the front door with my head high, my steps sure, and I felt the weight of 6 years lift from my shoulders. The servants lined the hallway, their faces solemn. They had heard what happened in London. They knew I was innocent. Some looked ashamed, others looked relieved. Mrs. Daventry was gone, arrested, and awaiting trial. The Dowager Duchess had retreated to the Dower House and refused to see anyone. The hall was mine now, at least for the moment, and I intended to make the most of it. Millie met me at the top of the stairs, her eyes red from crying. "My lady," she said, throwing her arms around me. "I was so frightened. I thought they would hang you." I held her tight. It is over now. You are safe. We are all safe." She pulled back, wiping her eyes. "What will you do now?" I looked around the hallway, at the dark wood and the heavy curtains and the oppressive silence. "I am going to leave this place. I am going to start a new life." Her face fell. "You are leaving England?" "No, not England, just Graymore." I smiled. "There is a cottage in the village my father left me when he died. It is small, simple, nothing like this. But it is mine, and I think I would like to live there for a while, to learn who I am when I am not a duchess." She nodded slowly. "Will you take me with you? If you wish to come?" Her face brightened. "I do, my lady, I do." "Then pack your things. We leave tomorrow." That night, I walked through the hall one last time. I went to the library and ran my fingers over the spines of the books I had read during those long, lonely years. I went to the drawing room where the inquest had been held, where I had been accused and judged and nearly condemned. I went to the gardens and stood by the fountain, watching the moonlight ripple across the water. And then I went to the Duke's study. I had never been inside before. It had always been locked, forbidden, a place that belonged to him and him alone. But the door was open now, and I stepped inside. The room smelled of leather and tobacco and old paper. His desk was still covered with documents, his pen lying across an unfinished letter. His chair was pushed back, as though he had just stood up and would return at any moment. I sat in his chair and looked around. The walls were lined with portraits of his ancestors, stern-faced men and women who had built this estate, this legacy, this cage. I wondered if he had felt trapped too, if he had looked at these walls and wished he could escape. On the desk was a small wooden box. I opened it. Inside were letters, old and yellowed with age. I took one out and unfolded it carefully. It was written in a woman's hand, delicate and flowing. "My dearest love," it began. I read through it slowly, my heart aching. It was from Catherine. She had loved him. She had written to him of dreams and plans and a future they would never have. And at the bottom, in his handwriting, was a single word: "Forgive me." He had carried this guilt for so many years. He had let it shape his life, define his choices, destroy his chance at happiness. And in the end, he had passed that burden to me. Asking for forgiveness he did not deserve, but needed desperately. I folded the letter and placed it back in the box. Then I closed it and stood. "I forgive you," I whispered to the empty room. "I forgive you for all of it." And then I walked out and did not look back. The next morning, Lord Ashford came to see me before I left. He arrived in a carriage, dressed in traveling clothes, his face serious. I met him in the front hall, my bags already packed, Millie waiting by the door. "You are leaving," he said. It was not a question. "I am." He looked around the hall, his expression unreadable. "I do not blame you. This place is full of ghosts." "It is. But they are not mine to carry anymore." He nodded. "I came to say goodbye, and to give you this." He handed me an envelope. "It is a letter from my brother's solicitor. Your portion of the estate. It is more than generous. You will not want for anything." I took the envelope but did not open it. "Thank you. For everything. I could not have done this without you." He smiled, just slightly. "I think you could have. But I'm glad I was able to help." "What will you do now?" I asked. He shrugged. "Return to my own estate. Try to repair the damage my brother's death has caused. Perhaps find a way to make peace with his memory. I hope you do." He looked at me for a long moment. "If you ever need anything, Lady Genevieve, you need only ask. I will remember that. But I think, for the first time in my life, I do not need anything from anyone. I am enough on my own." He bowed. "Then I wish you well. And I you." He turned and left. I watched him go, watched the carriage disappear down the long drive, and then I picked up my bags and walked out of Graymore Hall for the last time. The cottage was everything I had hoped it would be. Small, yes, with only 3 rooms and a garden that had grown wild from neglect. But it was bright and warm, with windows that let in the sun and a fireplace that crackled cheerfully in the evenings. Millie and I spent the first week cleaning and arranging, making it into a home. We planted flowers in the garden, hung curtains in the windows, filled the shelves with books. And slowly, I began to breathe again. The village accepted me more readily than I had expected. I was no longer the Duchess of Graymore, the cold, distant figure who lived in the hall and never spoke to anyone. I was simply Lady Genevieve, a widow trying to build a new life. The vicar's daughter, Miss Hartley, came to visit often. We took walks together, talked about books and music and the small joys of everyday life. She never mentioned the trial, never asked about the Duke. She simply treated me as a friend, and I was grateful for it. 6 months passed, then a year. The seasons changed, the garden bloomed and faded and bloomed again. I learned to bake bread, to tend the roses, to sit by the fire on cold nights and read without fear of judgment or interruption. I learned what it felt like to be happy. And then, one afternoon in early spring, there was a knock at the door. I opened it to find Lord Ashford standing on the step, holding a bouquet of wildflowers. He looked older somehow, tired, but there was a softness in his eyes I had not seen before. "Lord Ashford," I said, surprised. "What are you doing here?" He smiled. "I came to see how you were, and to ask if you might join me for a walk." I hesitated, then nodded. "Let me get my shawl." We walked through the village and out into the fields beyond, where the grass was green and dotted with daisies. The air smelled of rain and earth and new growth. We did not speak for a long time, just walked side by side, listening to the birds and the wind. Finally, he said, "I have been thinking about you." "Have you?" "Yes." He stopped and turned to face me. "I have been thinking about what you said the day you left, that you were enough on your own. I admired that. I still do." I looked at him, not understanding. "But I wonder," he continued, "if you might allow someone else to be part of your life. Not to complete you, not to fix you, just to walk beside you." I felt my heart skip. "Lord Ashford. James. My name is James. James." I took a breath. "Why?" "Because I have spent the past year trying to forget you, and I cannot. Because when I think of the future, I see you in it. Because I believe my brother knew, at the end, that you deserved more than he could give you. And I think," he paused, "I think I would like to try to give it to you, if you will let me." I stared at him. A year ago, I would have said no. A year ago, I was still too hurt, too broken, too afraid to trust anyone. But I was not that woman anymore. "I would like that," I said softly. He smiled, a real smile this time, warm and genuine. "Then may I call on you? Properly, I mean, with flowers and conversation and all the things a courtship should have?" "Yes, you may." He offered me his arm, and I took it. We walked back to the cottage together, talking about everything and nothing, and I felt something I had not felt in a very long time. I felt hope. I felt joy. I felt alive. The Duke had given me a title, a home, and 6 years of silence. But in his death, he had given me something far more valuable. He had given me the truth. He had given me freedom. And he had given me the chance to discover who I was when I was no longer his. I would always remember him. I would always carry the weight of what we had been and what we might have become if he had been braver, if I had been stronger, if the world had been kinder. But I would not let his memory define me. I would not let his mistakes become my own. I had been accused of killing him. I had been judged, condemned, nearly destroyed. But I had survived. And in surviving, I had learned the most important lesson of all. I was not a victim. I was not a prisoner. I was not a ghost haunting the halls of a house that did not want me. I was a woman, strong, resilient, capable of love and forgiveness and hope. And I was free. James began to visit regularly after that. At first, it was once a week, then twice, then nearly every day. He brought books and flowers and stories of his travels. He made me laugh, something I had forgotten how to do. He listened when I spoke, truly listened, as though my words mattered. And slowly, carefully, I began to let him in. It was not like my marriage to the Duke. There was no grand ceremony, no pressure, no expectations. It was simple and honest and real. And when he asked me, one evening as we sat by the fire, if I would consider marrying him, I said yes without hesitation. We were married in the village church, with Miss Hartley as my witness and Millie weeping happy tears in the front pew. It was a small ceremony, quiet and intimate, nothing like the grand affair my first wedding had been. But it was mine, and it was perfect. We did not return to Graymore Hall. James sold the estate to a distant cousin who had no connection to the family's dark history. The money went to charity, to the tenants, to the village, and we built a new life together, in a house by the sea where the air was clean and the horizon was endless. I never forgot the Duke. I never forgot the letter he had written, the words he had whispered in his final moments. Forgive me. And I had. I had forgiven him for the silence, for the distance, for the years we had lost. But more importantly, I had forgiven myself. For staying, for hoping, for believing that love could grow in the dark. It could not. Love needed light. It needed warmth. It needed honesty and courage and the willingness to be vulnerable. And I had found that. Not with the man I had married, but with the man who had helped me discover who I could be. Years later, when people asked me about the Duke, about the trial, about the whispers and the scandal, I told them the truth. He was a man who loved and lost and was too afraid to love again. He was a man who made mistakes and paid for them with his life. But he was also a man who, in the end, gave me the greatest gift of all. He set me free, and I would be grateful for that, always.